My name is Hank Johnson. I'm an alcoholic. And Margaret, I'm glad you got a chance to talk to Maria. I used to drink a lot, and I'm very glad that I'm able to be here this morning, because Sunday mornings was not my best day. And but I've had a wonderful time here this weekend, and my flights were right on time. Everything was just fine for me. That has something to do with quality sobriety. I'm not sure. And Margaret was a little late coming up to the podium, and we were a little concerned what happened, and Clancy said to her, that he had worked with me to try to get me to become to be responsible and be on time. He worked for years with me to try to be on time, and we almost blew it this morning. And so Kevin showed me around your community here, and we went to see the Viking ship, which was really interesting, and went out to the fort, Abercrombie or whatever, and it was just great. And it's been a wonderful convention up until now. And my story is really a very boring story. You hear exciting things. Speakers like Clancy, my God, that talk last night was just sensational. I've heard him so many times over the years, and he just gets better and better and better. And one of these days, I'm going to buy one of his tapes. But my drunk log is very boring. I just used to sit around and drink. That's it. I used to watch a lot of TV and play a lot of old phonograph records, and once in a while I'd read a book, nothing very heavy, just some condensed version in the Reader's Digest. And I just kind of watched the world go by. I was an observer of life. I didn't participate in it. I did watch you and criticize you for the way you lived your life. And I knew I could do better if I really wanted to. But I just kind of, for 30 years, I just postponed living for 30 years. I went into a bar when I was 18 years old, and I was in a big hurry to grow up, and I know that if you can buy a drink over a bar without being asked how old you are, you've arrived. So I did. I walked in this bar, I ordered a bourbon and Coke or whatever it was, and the guy served me without asking me how old I was. And in California, you're supposed to be 21. I passed for 21. He gave me the drink, and I drank it, and immediately I became a man. That's what I wanted to be, a man, and a man can buy a drink over a bar without being asked. I could play the jukebox over in the corner just as good as the rest of the guys. And in fact, I thought my selection of songs were a little better than most. I could sit at the bar and look at myself in the mirror and get better looking after each drink. And I just went back there every opportunity I had from then on. And I met my wife in a bar. Where else do you meet girls? And we bought a little house out in West Covina, a little suburb of Los Angeles. And the payments were $56 a month. And that included taxes and interest and the whole shot, No down payment, of course. And I had trouble making those payments. Those payments had come due on the first of the month, and I used my money to drink with. And I just couldn't come up with a payment. So I figured, well, I'll double up next month. And I'll skip the payment this month and double up next month. Next month has come along, I'd have to come up with $112. My God, where am I going to come up with that kind of money? And somehow I would. I'd stip all the rest of my creditors. And if anybody would have asked me, Hank, what is your problem? I would have said money. Money's my problem. I don't know how I ever got involved in that work I do. It doesn't pay enough. And if she would only go to work and help out, Instead, it turns out she was pregnant. She had already had a baby by a previous marriage, and now she's going to have another one. And I didn't start saving for that baby until about a week before it was due. I couldn't come up with a doctor bill or anything. So I went to the beneficial finance company and I borrowed the money from the beneficial finance company. And when I finally got on AA and my son finally turned 25 years old, I finally got beneficial paid off. I don't know about you people, but I always had a crisis in my life. Every time I'd almost get those people paid off, something would happen, and I'd have to go and consolidate my bills again. And I never got enough money. They'd never loan me enough to pay them all off. And besides, something would happen, a part of that money on the way home. And I'd get there and I'd write these checks out to try to pay all these bills off, and I'd be short. So then I'd have to go to the Pacific Finance Company and borrow the rest. And sometimes I'd have beneficial Pacific Finance and a bank loan going all at the same time. And at income tax time, when you're figuring all that interest out and everything, going, what in hell am I buying? What am I making all these payments for? I'm not buying a thing. I'm just making payments. That's all. And it turned out, I finally figured it out after I was sober a couple of years. Finally figured it out. What I did was I financed 30 years of drinking. Every time I took a drink, I paid an extra 10 or 15 cents in interest to beneficial finance. And thank God I don't have to do that anymore. But money is my problem. We almost lost that house several times. We finally had to sell it, moved in with my father for free. And this is the way I live. And I used to get kicked out of the house a lot. My wife would come home and find me intoxicated, and for some reason that bothered her. And she'd tell me to leave. It never occurred to me to say, wait a minute, I'm buying this house. I'm the guy making the payments here. How can you kick me out of here? And you can't get me. No, I never argued at all. She said, go. I just left. That's all. I never moved very far from home. I just moved down the street. It's close to, a little apartment somewhere. And then I'd work myself back in. In and out, back and forth. And she divorced me 3 times. And I wound up in a little shack in Hermosa Beach, a half a block from the water. It was just a little garage is what it was. And it was they had made some living quarters. It was a little 12 by 15 room, actually. And I bought a turntable and 10 speakers from a friend of mine. I had speakers in all 4 corners, behind the drapes, behind the couch, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, you name it. I had a speaker there. And, a typical day back then is I would wake up late and go to work late. And I'd go to lunch early and have a martini. And then I'd have another one, and then I'd have another one, and then I'd have another one. Then I'd call the office and tell them I forgot to tell you. I'm going on a lot of calls, take messages. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And I'd head towards the beach, and I'd stop and buy the cheapest bottle of vodka I could find, whatever was on sale that day, whatever they were pushing in that dusty basket they have sitting on the top of the counter. That's what I bought. And I'd get home about 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon, and I'd hang up my clothes real carefully because I'm kind of a neat drunk, and put my shoes away and everything, and I'd put my pajamas on. Then I'd sit on the edge of the bed, and I'd tap this cheap vodka and take a big, big jolt out of it, several swallows. And I'd say to myself, well, you've done it again today. This cannot continue. You're not the only guy that's ever been divorced. You're not the only guy that's ever been in debt. Why the hell don't you do something about it? All you do is sit around and talk about stuff. You never take any action on anything. Then I put one of those old 78 records on the turntable. Something like Billy Eckstine singing, Who Can I Turn To? And then I'd go into my fantasy, and I'd start thinking about, at least you could get a second job. You can't do anything about your marriage, but at least you could get a second job anyway and get out of debt. Then I'd say, wait a minute, you don't need to do that. You're in sales. If you're in sales, you can make any amount of money you want, within reason, of course. God, that's right, I'd say to myself. And starting tomorrow morning, it's all going to be different. Starting tomorrow morning, I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock. I'm going to get down to that office, by 7. I'm going to knock out paperwork for a couple hours. I'm going to be ready to do business starting at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. It's all going to be different starting tomorrow. And tomorrow after, I'm going to spend every waking moment earning money. You know, what the hell? I can, you know, and I've got to, I can go in the office on Saturday and clean up my paperwork. And hell, I got a key to the place. I can go in there on Sunday and I'll plan my work for the coming week. And, you know, if you're in sales, if you plan your work and then work your plan, you can't miss. And I knew that. And God, I was just excited about my new solution that I had. And the solution on my crowd, starting tomorrow, it's all going to be different. I'm not even going to drink for the rest of this year. I'm going to devote the rest of this year to earning money and getting straightened out once and for all. And God, it felt good. And I don't know about you people, but when I had those brilliant ideas, I have cause to celebrate, so I have another drink. And I'd look up at the clock, it'd be 10 minutes to 11. Can't believe what I just sat down here on the edge of this bed. Here, it can't be 10 minutes to 11. I'd call the operator, check. Yep, 10 minutes to 11. Where is this day gone? I can't believe it. And then I'd realize I was almost out of booze. So I'd throw my clothes on over my pajamas and run 2 blocks to the liquor store. I had to get there before 11. That's when they closed, and I had to get there. And that's when I first started jogging, about that time. I had to get the guy just as he was closing up, bottle of Smirnoffs. I always bought the better brands there in the neighborhood. I wouldn't want him to think I was cheap right there around where I live. And so I'd come back to my shack, or I'd have peace and contentment, security for the rest of the night. And I'd start rehearsing the speech I was going to have to give, because I knew I was going to be salesman of the year. And somewhere in there, I'd pass out. And I'd wake up the next morning, it'd be 10 o'clock. I'm already an hour late to work. God, I'd get in that car and weave in and out of traffic. I had to get there because, you see, I should have worked yesterday. I left all these papers all over my desk. I had papers in my desk drawer. Some of them were months old. They were just too old to turn in. If I turned them in, I'd be fired for holding them so long. If I didn't turn them in, and I knew it was all going to happen. I had that fear of impending doom that they talk about here in AA. And I'd get there and check everything out, and everything's the same as yesterday. Saved again. And get a cup of coffee and go back to my desk and shuffle papers and make excuses to my customers. And they'd want to know where their stuff was. And I'd blame it on everything I could possibly think of. Like the computer's been down for the last 3 days. As soon as the computer starts working, we'll get a printout, and then I'll get on your case and I'll call you about it. And I'm one of the originators of the computer excuse. They're still using that excuse right today. Every once in a while I'll call some business and they say my computer's down. And so I'm one of the originators of that excuse. I always wonder sometimes when they give me that, if I should go into my 12-step pitch. I've used that hundreds and hundreds of times. In fact, I used that excuse before we even had a computer in our office. And so I'd shuffle papers and make excuses, and I'd go to the bar at a respectable time. I had a bar conveniently located right next door to where I worked. And I'd go there and have a martini, and then I'd have another one, then I'd have another one, then I'd have another one. And then I'd call the office and tell them, I forgot to tell you, I'm going a lot of calls, take messages, I'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And I'd head toward the beach and stop and buy a cheap bottle of vodka and get home and hang up my clothes, put my pajamas on, and it'd be like 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon, and I'd sit there and open that cheap vodka and take a big jolt out of it, and say to myself, done it again today. This cannot continue. You're not the only guy that's ever been divorced. You're not the only guy that's ever been in debt. Why the hell introduce on a body? All you do is sit around and talk about stuff. You never take any action on anything. Then I put one of those old records on the turntable, something like Billy Eckstine singing "Who Can I Turn To?" Then I'd have another one, then I'd go into my fantasy. I didn't do that once or twice. I did that hundreds of times. And the only reason I kept my job is because they had me scared down there. They frightened me. They'd want to know, are you in sales here? And I'd say, yeah, I'm in sales. Well, how about making a sale? And they just scare me. So I'd say, don't worry about a thing. I'm a fast finisher. And I was. I work around the clock. And I always made my quota with this company. At the end of the year, company I worked for, they give you a plaque with your name on it if you make your quota, exceed your quota. Hank Johnson. Outstanding salesmanship and product knowledge and being the type of representative we want to represent this company for the year 19 so-and-so. And for 8 drunken years in a row, I won a plaque every single year. And then I got sober. And then I didn't win a plaque for 8 years. I lost my motivation. Fear motivates me. You scare me enough, I'll work like hell. You put the pressure on me and I can work. And after I got sober, the pressure was kind of removed after a while. And so I kind of just, I found I went to work on time. When I got home on time, and all that, but I just couldn't seem to work. And a lot of guys, they get sober, and it seems like they just go right out and make $1 million, whatever it is. My work, I could never get, it never was all that important to me after I got sober. Now, I don't know if that's good or bad. It's just the truth, that's all. But I've seen guys like my son, for instance, he just really goes, and he's the money maker, but not me. But what happened to me is after 2 years of sobriety, I walked in the office one day, and the guy said, "You're fired." Fired? You got to be kidding. I got an outstanding record with this company. And he says, "Well, not lately, you don't." And I'd say, I said, "Well, I can't accept you firing me. There's no way, you can't fire me. I'm going to go see the regional manager." And I did. I went to see him. And I used to say that I took my fifth step with him, but I didn't. What I really did is I snivelled and cried to him. I told him, what they don't understand down there at the office, they want to fire me down there. What they don't understand, almost 2 years ago, I completely changed my life. I stopped drinking and trying to make it with my wife again and the kids, trying to pay my bills on time, and to become a citizen in the community again. Help poor, unfortunate people such as I recover from a seemingly hopeless disease called alcoholism. The guy looked at me funny. He said, "My God, I had no idea you had any trouble with booze, Hank." He says, "I sure hope everything works out for you." And he said, "Hope you and your wife and everything works out." He says, "But I can't interfere with what goes on down at the branch office. If they don't want you to work there, I can't interfere with that." He said, "You claim to be a salesman? Go sell yourself to another branch office. We got 80 of them." And that's what I did. And I'm still with that company. And I recently completed 25 years, and I told them what they could do with their job. And I could highly wait, tell you that. Not really. They were very good to me. But it just, I deserved being fired. Because that first 2 years of my sobriety, I couldn't think. I was so enthusiastic about sobriety. And after I finally got on the program, I was so enthusiastic about sobriety and AA that I couldn't think of anything else. And I'd go to work in the morning, and I couldn't, I spent like 95% of my day calling other members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I deserved to be fired. I might not be sober today if I hadn't done it that way, but nevertheless, I deserved being fired. And also what happened to me is that I became spiritual. That happens to us. I see that happening all around me. People, we get sober, and then for some, we get spiritual. I became spiritual. I got it all screwed up, but I just kind of sailed off into the blue. And I became just a little cut above the rest of you folks. And you had to do all these mundane things like work and all that. God turned it over to God. God's going to take care of me. And after 2 years of doing that, what I didn't understand is that God doesn't sell insurance. And after 2 years of that, I got fired. my sponsor finally got to me. And he said, Hank, some of it just gets so heavenly that we just become of no earthly good to anyone. And he pointed out that in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, it states in there that it's okay to have your head in the clouds, but we should keep our feet firmly planted on the ground. That's where our fellows are, and that's where the work is to be done. And that's what I've tried to do ever since. And so I did. I went and sold myself to another office. And, before all this happened, my son had to come and live with me. He seemed like he was screwing up at home, and he was going to high school and getting in a lot of nickel and dime trouble. Nothing real serious, just a lot of minor stuff. But she couldn't cope with it, so she called me. And he had gone out one night and gotten drunk or something and came home and threw up on the carpet or whatever. And so she called me. She said, "Come and get your drunken son. He's just like you are." And, I should have said, "Wait a minute, you want him in a divorce. Don't, you're having trouble, take care of it. Don't call me." But I had no self-worth back in those days. Back then, I just did whatever anybody told me to do. They were forceful enough. I'd just do it, that's all. And she called and said, "Come and get your drunken son, just like you are." So I did. And he had to come and live with me. He didn't want to, and I didn't want him to, but she's sick, so we had to do it, right? And that was the start of a beautiful relationship that we've got going to this day. So wasn't very much longer after that that she moved in with us too. Seemed that she had came down and checked us out. And we got to talking, and you know how that is. One thing led to another. It was a beautiful Sunday and afternoon, and we got to talk. And we admitted we were really miserable people, but we seemed to be more miserable apart than we were together. Why don't we try this thing one more time? And she started promising me stuff, and then I would top her, and then she would then I promised it. And we spent the whole afternoon promising wonderful things to each other. I'm sure we knew we couldn't fulfill any of those promises, but it was fun while we were doing it. And one of the things she promised was that she wouldn't fight me on my drinking anymore. In fact, she'd join me. And little did I know that she had crossed that so-called invisible line into alcoholism right away. She was an alcoholic from drink one. She always knew she was an alcoholic, and she never drank. But during that 2 or 3 year period we were apart there, she started drinking, and she crossed that line immediately with the first drink. And as she was completing her first drink, she would black out, and she was a blackout drinker. And myself, now, alcohol, I had a lot of fun drinking. Drinking did all the things it was supposed to do. Loosened me up, and I was able to converse with people, and it was a social lubricant for me. It did all the things. I was able to dance and romance and do all the things you're supposed to do when without booze, and it did the job it was supposed to do. And then I became allergic to it too. I don't know when that was, but I just wasn't even aware that I had become allergic to it. But, the same thing happened to me with penicillin. I took penicillin several times. It did the job it was supposed to do. And the last time I took penicillin, I wound up in the hospital for 8 days. The doctor said, "My God, who gave you penicillin anyway?" Well, it's always worked before. Well, don't ever take it again. The next time you take it, you might die. You're allergic to it. No kidding. Okay, I promise. And I'm proud to stand up here this morning and tell you folks, I've got about 35 years off of penicillin. I haven't had to get a sponsor. I haven't had to join any kind of an organization or anything. I just quit cold turkey. But that stuff worked for me, and all of a sudden I became allergic to it. And that's the same thing that happened to me with booze. And it really doesn't matter if if you're a born alcoholic, became alcoholic with your first drink, or you drank yourself into alcoholism, which I feel that I did. We're all alcoholics anyhow. It really doesn't matter all that much. But so we can never drink together. Our drinking just was no good, and it was always bad, and never got any better. And finally, and I would continue I'd go to work late, come home early, sit there and fantasize that, I sailed all over the world sitting on the edge of my bed. I've been all over the world, and I've never been out of the house. But my son come home like 2:30 in the afternoon. And I'd say to her, honey, I don't know who you think you're kidding. It's only 2:30. School doesn't even get out till 3. You're already home at 2:30. And I'd stand there with a bottle of vodka in my hand with my pajamas on, and I'd say to him, how the hell do you ever expect to amount to anything? If you don't apply yourself in this world, my son, you haven't got a chance. And I'm really worried about you, And he'd look at me funny. And he always had 3 or 4 guys with him, and they all looked at me funny. They all had hair clear down below their shoulder. They were surfers. And then I'd continue my fantasy and play all these records, and then she'd come home, and we'd have our first drink of the day together, and then the argument would start, and, we never could drink together. And so finally I said, this isn't working out any better than it worked out at the other house. And but I said, I'm going to tell you something. I said, I moved here first, therefore you can leave this time. And I said, I'm going to go to my brother's house tonight, stay overnight with him, and when I come back tomorrow morning, I expect you gone. And so while I was at my brother's house, my good brother, the brother that you can go to at 1 o'clock in the morning and knock on his door, and as long as you got something in a brown paper bag with you, why, he'll pull you right in. I didn't go to my other brother that you go to on Christmas Eve, and he pours you a drink, and you say, well, Merry Christmas, and you have a drink, he opens up this new bottle and pours you one, and, oh, Merry Christmas, and then he puts the cap on it and puts it back up on the shelf. Next Christmas, you go and you take the same damn bottle down, pour you the second shot. I didn't go to him. I went to my good brother. And I sat up all night with him and philosophized with him. And it seemed like his wife didn't appreciate him either. We both picked a couple of losers. And so while I was gone, she decided to commit suicide. And Clancy were talking last night about suicide, that was her solution to everything. Something bad happened, you just kill yourself, that's all, that's it. And so she was suicidal right into AA. She had about 8 months of sobriety, and something bad happens, and she was going to do it. I'm sure it was bad, because, what the hell, you wouldn't kill yourself over nothing, it was a serious thing. And then she remembered she couldn't, because she was the cookie lady at the meeting that night. You wonder why they give some of us flakes some of these jobs that they get us, Well, hell, it turns out that they're life-saving jobs. And her sponsor finally got to her and conned her to get her out. But that night before she was going to do it, and she was in a blackout, but before she did it, she went into the closet where my clothes were hanging and just took a knife and just slashed every bit of clothes I owned, just everything, ripped it all to pieces, cut my ties in half, my shirts, and everything, just made a complete shambles out of everything. Even took the knife and stabbed my damn shoes and just made it, yeah. And then she took the rags that she had made and put them around the doors and the windows of this little place we lived in, tried to make the place airtight. And she turned the gas on her kitchen up and went to bed. Next morning, she woke up. Nothing happened. That old place we lived in was right near the ocean, and the wind used to blow through those boards, and hell, you could have turned the gas on 10 of them to never smell it in there. though she survived. And she looked around. She was the only one that had been there that night. And as she looked around, she couldn't believe what she had done, because she was in a blackout. And then I came home, and I had trouble believing it myself. Then our son came home, and he thought we were moving again or something. That's another thing. We used to move a lot. I don't know if anybody identifies with that or not, but we were movers. And there we were. We had hit bottom. I'm from a good family. She was from a good family. When we got married, we had great plans. We were going to live, a wonderful life together and have kids and all this stuff, And actually, we were going to live the good life. And actually, all we had done is sit around and drink every bit of goodness out of our lives. And from then on, it was terrible. From then on, it wasn't all that good before that, but from then on, it was really bad. And from then on, I really didn't enjoy drinking. I had to drink just to drown out my thoughts. And so, we had hit bottom. I didn't know I'd hit bottom, so I just kept on drinking. But this is the part in the talk where a lot of guys will say, I hit bottom, so then I called the central office and I called AA. And some guy, real nice guy, came out and took me to a meeting, and everything's just been wonderful ever since. Not me. I didn't even know I had hit bottom, so I just kept on drinking. And sometimes they say, and then I had a moment of truth. Yeah. So I called AA, and everything's been great ever since. Yeah. Hell, every time I ever had a moment of truth, I drank immediately. I don't want to know anything about the truth, especially about me, my truth. Yeah, I've had 1,000 moments of truth, and I just drank immediately, because I don't want to face the truth about myself, especially. And, before that happened, we had started back to group therapy. And this therapist asked me one time, "You really drink as much as she says?" I said, "Hell yes, I do. I drink a lot. Who wouldn't, married to a woman like that? Got 2 of the worst children you could possibly imagine. A pressure job. I got the job enough to make you drink. And, but I don't know what the big deal is. Hell, they've never missed a meal. They've always had shoes. They've always had bicycles. Whatever they were supposed to have, they had. I made sure they had. And even if I had to borrow money. But so I just don't understand what the big deal is about my drinking." And he said, "Have you ever thought of quitting?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, I have. I thought about it every night. I'm not going to quit tonight, starting tomorrow morning, yeah, but not tonight." And he said, "Have you ever thought of going to AA?" And I said, "Thanks, but no thanks. I've already been to AA." And I had gone to a meeting one time. It was a meeting where they give chips out. I don't know if they do that around here or not, but it's a custom in some of the meetings in the Los Angeles area. They give chips for various lengths of sobriety, like the little poker chip. And it's at 30 days on one side and easy does it on the other or something. And anyone just finished their first 30 days of sobriety? If so, come up and get a chip. Here comes this guy up. "My name is Joe Blow, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm really proud to get this chip. Then I know this is a spiritual program that I found God when I walked through the doors of AA, and it's the lights in the eyes of the people that did turn me on and keep me coming back to these meetings. I just love every single person here. This wonderful, glorious way of life we have here. Just before I came to the meeting, I got a call from my employer, and he's made me general manager down for fire. The best 30 days I'd ever spent in my life. But it's wonderful, And for all you newcomers, keep coming back. We love you." Oh, God. Anybody else? And here comes this lady up. "My name is Mary Smith, and I'm an alcoholic, and I know this is a spiritual program that I found God when I walked through the doors of AA, and it's the lights in the eyes of the people that just turn me on, keep me coming back for these meetings. I just love every single person here. And hate is no longer a word in my vocabulary. I love everybody, not just the members of AA, but everybody in the whole world, man. This is a wonderful, glorious way of life they've taught me here in AA. And just a short time ago, my children were failing in school, and now we're getting letters from all the major universities throughout the United States, all for his scholarships. And it's wonderful. I wake up in the morning and I reach over and I grab the hand of God and I walk through the day hand in hand with God. This is a wonderful, glorious way of life. And for all you newcomers, keep coming back. We love you. Shakes. I never went back, I'll tell you that. And so when this guy suggested AA, I said, forget it. I've already been to AA, some kind of a spiritual thing. It's a religious cult of some kind. I'm not sure what it is, to tell you the truth, but it's okay for them, but not for me. And so I said, but I read an article about some stuff called anabuse. I said, I'm going to quit once and for all to prove that alcohol really is not our problem in our marriage. And he said, so I'm going to quit. I was right, too. Alcohol was only a symptom of our problem. But, and so I said, I read this article about anabuse. And it says there that if you drink on top of anabuse, you get sick. And so I think I'll get some of that. I'm going to quit just to prove once and for all that, it's not the booze that's our problem. So we made an appointment with a doctor. And the doctor's receptionist said, don't drink for at least 48 hours prior to coming to the appointment. And I didn't. I didn't drink for 48 hours. And I went on my appointment. I said, I'm here to get the anabuse. Oh, yes. The doctor checked my heart, blood pressure, and all that. Called me into his office and closed the door. And I love it, God. And he started talking to me about the disease of alcoholism. Start telling me about how people with the disease of alcoholism have character defects, and they refuse to cope with their life. Instead, they drink tonight instead. And they wake up the next morning and they still got all their problems, only now they got a hangover on top of it. And they repeat this thing over and over and over again. And a guy was telling me my story, and I didn't recognize it. And I finally said, and he said, if what you say is true, if you haven't had a drink for 48 hours prior to coming here, he says, you don't even need you don't need anabuse. He said, if you haven't drank for 48 hours prior to coming here, you don't need anabuse. You're over the hump. If you don't want to, you don't need to take another drink for as long as you live. And geez, I wanted to quit, but that seemed like an awful long time right at that night. And he kind of scared me. But he just went on and on and on about the disease of alcoholism. And he says, but, so you really don't need that stuff. And I says, well, if I don't need it, then I guess I better go. How much do I owe you? And he said, I can see I'm not making much of an impression on you. So I'm going to tell you something I wouldn't normally tell my patients, but due to the nature of your appointment here today, I'm going to tell you this. I happen to know a little bit about alcoholism. You see, my wife's an alcoholic, and we've tried everything known to medical science. We've tried anabuse and psychiatry and rest homes and sanitariums and all the things they talk about in Chapter 3. We've tried. And he says nothing ever has worked for her. But she's sober now. She goes to AA. And that's what I recommend that you do, Rory. And promise me that when you leave here, you'll drive up to the Manhattan Beach Clubhouse and buy the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And there'll be no charge for this call. And that was the only thing that guy said that day that impressed me at all. And I went up and bought a book and threw it on the dresser and had another drink. Shady Dr. T. Yeah. And so then this fiasco happened where my wife tried to commit suicide and tore up my clothes. And she had been with me and heard all that stuff that the doctor had said. And she went back and asked the doctor if he thought she was an alcoholic. And he said he didn't know, but why did she go to some meetings with his wife? His wife would be happy to take her. So she came home that day and said, I'm going to go to AA, the doctor's wife. And I said, oh, Jake, be careful, whatever you do. Just remember what the name of the organization is. It's Alcoholics Anonymous. And that means no name. Don't give them my name, whatever you do. I don't want anybody knocking on my door trying to convert me. And so off she went to the meeting with the doctor's wife. And the very first thing that they taught her in AA, the very first thing was that it wasn't her fault that I drank. They could have started her off with something entirely different than that. But I had her convinced that it was all her fault that I drank. But they said, no, don't kid yourself. If you're carry that guilt around with you that you think you're making somebody drink, forget it. You're only kidding yourself. You cannot make anybody drink. You can't make anybody quit either. We don't have that kind of power that we can make anybody quit drinking. So don't pour his booze down his sink. If you'll just go buy another bottle. But if you think you've got a problem with alcohol, you think you're an alcoholic, maybe you better come back to these meetings and work on your problem and just let that SOB drink himself to death if that's what he wanted to do. It's his life. She kind of liked the ring of that. And so she used to go to meetings, and to be a good guy, I used to go to meetings with her occasionally. And I liked the speaker meetings. I thought they were very entertaining. And I used to go once in a while. I heard one Sunday they asked me to go to a meeting. Her sponsor, asked me if I would go to Atar, the little town, and to have an after me meeting, anniversary meeting. Some guy was going to be talking there. That they thought I looked like. So I, be a good guy. I did. It was right football season though, and the Rams were on TV, and I, too bad there were timings bad here, but I'll go to be a good guy, and I could catch the second half later and all that. And so I went to the meeting, and the guy stood up and coughed, and he said, I'd much rather be home watching the Rams play on TV than be here in May. But he says that I identified immediately. And he says, but I've been taught in AA that to honor an AA request. And so here I am. And he went on and on and on about all the things he had done. And he talked about getting thrown in the Texas State Insane Asylum, escaping from the Texas State Insane Asylum. Really funny. I almost got out of my chair, And I didn't identify with any of that stuff. I never done it, But he finally came to the punchline for me. He said, of all the things that I've done, drunk and sober, I've been able to forgive myself pretty well for. But there's the things I haven't done that bothers me. Things I should have done that bothered me. The sins of omission. She nailed. That's me. All I ever did is sit around, and I never done a damn thing ever. You can't blame anything on me, by God. I haven't done it. And I identify. And I can't stand, and that's the truth about myself. And I can't stand to hear the truth about myself. I could hardly wait to get out of that meeting, get a drink. But I identified. I knew I was an alcoholic after that. And I kept continuing to go to meetings, and I hated the meetings. Absolutely hated. Couldn't stand it. And because they were getting close to the truth. And I don't want to hear the truth. So, I stopped going to meetings. Yeah, the meetings I used to go to. Sometimes I've heard people stand up here and say, there's no such thing as a bad meeting. Well, I haven't been to some of the meetings that I've been to. I'll tell you that. Now this is a great group here. My God, if I lived here, I'd belong to that Thursday night group. They got enthusiasm, and it's great to be here. But some of these groups you go to, and especially the group I went to when I was new, I just could not stand her. And they might be okay, I don't know, but the way I perceived them at the time, and I'd sit there, and I'd hard wait for the meeting to be over. And you think you can go home then? Hell no. There's another meeting that starts immediately after the meeting. And I could see these ladies coming towards me. And it just seemed like the closer they came to me, the longer their fingernails. The little fangs got drawn. And they were little vampires looking for new blood. and they come up to me and say, "Are you Lou's husband?" And I say, "No." I go, "Yeah, I'm Lou's husband." "Well, are you an alcoholic?" "No, I'm not an alcoholic." "She's one. I'm a visitor." There were some guests here this weekend too, I noticed, and I was a guest for a long time, I'll tell you that. And so I finally said, I'd gone to my last meeting. I can't stand this, but I am going to quit drinking. And, I went to all these meetings. I don't know how many meetings I went to. And I with a closed mind, and I just would not listen. And somehow I still got the message. Somehow I realized that I was an alcoholic. So I said I'd gone to my last meeting, but I am gonna quit. And so I did. I quit drinking a little bit before Thanksgiving. And I stayed sober clear through the drinkingest part of the year, through the Christmas holidays. And I remembered to buy Christmas presents that year and everything. And I stayed sober for them. They didn't appreciate it all that much, but by God, I was sober. And so Saturday night after Christmas, she went off to her meeting. And I stayed home. And I kind of took a little mini inventory of the situation. I said, if you're wrong. You're really not an alcoholic after all. If you can not drink through the drinkingest part of the year, that proved that you're not an alcoholic. So I went and bought a half a pint of vodka. I no sooner got it back to the house, I drank it and down I buy a half pint for. I went and bought a fifth. Went and bought another fifth. I drank all Saturday night and all day Sunday, and I closed the bar up somewhere at 2 a.m. And I woke up, it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm already an hour late to work, and I'm hungover and feeling lousy, but I had to get to work. You have to get to work on Monday morning, or else you're an alcoholic. Especially after a holiday, for God's sake, you gotta show up, and I did. But I went over to the bar a little early that day. And I ordered a Bloody Marys, because that's what you order when you're sick. It is really a social drink of any kind. It's this medicine. And I ordered a glass of mess. And I took that Bloody Mary and drank it straight down. I spilled part of it all on my tie, and nuts. And I went toward the restroom to clean it off, and I said, "Make me another one." And the bartender went in to clean the tomato juice, got my tie, and came back, and he said, "Did you want another Bloody Mary, or did you want a martini?" And I said, "Oh, just skip it." And I went over to the coffee shop section of this bar, had a sandwich and a glass of milk, and I haven't had a drink since. And it's been a little over 17 and a half years ago. And I didn't know that was my last drink. I had no idea that was my last drink. I've often thought since then, had I known that was my last drink, I sure as hell wouldn't have had a Bloody Mary. I could have had a martini, something in a fancy glass or something, I could have had, maybe some 50-year-old brandy in a brandy sniffer glass, class. I should have drank that, and then I could have smashed the glass, stomped out of the bar, triumphant over alcohol. But I didn't know. I didn't know that I had taken my last drink. And so far it had been my last drink. But I didn't realize that. 2 or 3 weeks went by, and I found myself in AA meetings, of all places. And I was, at the end of, then anger set in. I had just completed 30 years of drinking. I got this rotten wife and 2 of the worst children you could possibly imagine, and pressure job, and I owe money to everybody, and it's all past due, and now I can't drink. What the hell am I going to do with the rest of my life? Nothing. That's what I'm going to do. There's nothing to do if you don't drink. I don't care what they say in AA. It isn't all that good not drinking. I've been sober 30 days. I know how good you feel after 30 days. Or the hell do they think you're kidding anyhow? My life is over, and I know it. They might as well dig a hole, and I can jump in and cover me up. I'll be able to make it to work on time now, and I'll make it to work on time, and I'll come home on time. I'll go to an AA meeting on time, and then I'll get home and go to bed at a reasonable hour on time, and I'll get up on time again and go to work, and it's going to be a long, continuous, long gray tunnel for the rest of my life and never have any fun again, ever. You can't even go to a decent restaurant ever again. What's the first thing they want to know if you go into a nice restaurant? First thing they want to know is, would you like a cocktail before dinner? And you can't say to them, well, yeah, I'd like one, but you see, I've got this disease. And it's of a twofold nature. It's an allergy of the body coupled with an obsession of the mind. As if I take even one drink, I can't predict my behavior. Yeah, if it wasn't for that, I'd sure have one, I'll tell you that. I used to think you had to explain all that stuff to people. In fact, I used to spend about 90% of my day back then explaining things to people that didn't want to hear the explanation. If I was standing on a street corner and somebody walked up, I'm trying to explain what I was doing there. I had no self-worth at all. One little space I was taking up, I'd have to explain that away even. But that's one of the things I'm trying to do, is trying to quit. It's explaining. But it's a hard job. But I find myself every once in a while into some long, detailed explanation, and then I realize what I'm doing, and I'll stop right in mid-explanation. And the funny thing, they never notice the difference. It turns out no one's listening to your explanation. No one wants to hear your excuses why you haven't done something you were supposed to do in the first place. So I'm trying to quit altogether. And the hard job. And, everything I knew for sure, it turned out to be all wrong. Just how I even went to a nice restaurant recently. And the gal came up and said, would you like a cocktail before dinner? No, thanks. It didn't even faze her. That was one of the reservations I had about coming to AA. What are they going to say when they find out I don't drink? Well, I'm here to tell you that they don't really care out there whether you drink or not. And so when I said no thanks, she just went over to the next table and asked them, and they did. They're always drinking over there at the next table. I always check, and they're always drinking over there. But the sick part of that whole story is that every once in a while I look over there. It'll be a well-dressed couple. And they're celebrating some kind of an anniversary or something, and they've got these glasses, and they clipped in the glass, some kind of a toast. You can see a little bead of water melting down the side of the glass. You'd see the ollie right in the glass. If you look close, you can see the pimento in the ollie. And sometimes, the sick part of this is, sometimes that looks attractive to me. Sometimes that looks good to me after 17 and a half years of sobriety. I've heard the message every way you can hear it by now. I've heard thousands of ways, and still it looks attractive every now and then. So I know I have not been cured of alcoholism. I'm standing here this morning a sick man, and I know it. And I have not been cured of alcoholism. That's for damn sure. And so, what I've decided to do when I die is that I'm going to donate my brain to science. Because I just can't believe that I'm still attractive to me after all I'd heard, And so when they get my brain, they're going to study at UCLA or someplace. And they'll get my brain, they'll study it and see what a real alcoholic brain looks like. And they'll be able to get some data. And then they'll take that brain and they'll put it down in that solution, that alcoholic solution. And when that brain hits that solution, it's just going to go, and then it'll quiver, and it'll finally settle down and finally quiet down. And if you put your ear toward that glass and listen, you'll hear it say, ah. But until then, I'm going to call my sponsor. I'm going to read the book. I'm going to go to a lot of meetings. That I'm going to speak in Moorhead or any place else they ask me to, because I want to maintain my sobriety. Did you see? I never want to drink as long as I live again. I thought the world was over when I had to quit, and actually, it really was. I know now that it was really an in freedom that I was getting. I was unaware of it, but I know that to be true. And if I drink again, I'm going to lose that freedom. So I just hope I never have to again. And I'm going to do everything I can to maintain my sobriety. And I hope that I never lose the enthusiasm I have for this program. And so, but it isn't all fun and games. AA is not all fun and games. I've had some of the worst days of my entire life sober on the program, in the program of AA. Every once in a while, you'll hear somebody stand up here and say, my worst day, and I have trouble even saying it sticks in my craw. My worst day sober is better than the best day I ever had while drinking. Not me. I had a lot of good days drinking. I'm telling you, it was great for a while. And I had a lot of wonderful days. And I've had the worst days of my entire life sober in AA. They expect you to cope with all these things that are going to happen to you without any booze, without any pills, without any marijuana, without anything, And that's why I'm grateful that I got a sponsor when I got sober. Because, you see, I drifted along 2 or 3 months without a sponsor, and I just hated AA. And I heard Clancy again. I identified with him, and through a long, drawn-out story why I got him at the sponsor, and he's been my sponsor ever since. And I'm very glad that I got him as a sponsor because, you see, I really believe that you need to get a tough sponsor. And because, you see, a tough sponsor will insist that you work the steps. And a tough sponsor will help you maintain your sobriety while you're working it. And I'm very grateful to him that he insisted that I work the steps. I didn't have, I've got to stand it. I really cannot stand here and say I was all that willing. And it don't seem to matter. I worked the steps anyway. And I'll be damned if I haven't had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, just as if I'd have been sincere in the first place. It turns out it really doesn't matter, just work them. And so because I've been asked to cope with a lot of things that would have made me drink all that much more. And my wife got sick and turned out she had cancer, and we had a real bad time with it. I mean, she had obviously a worse time than me, but the pressure was on me. But by then I was responsible. By then I had good group insurance. She had all the medical care that if I'd had $5 million, she couldn't have had any better care. And I was responsible, and I was there for her, and I'm glad that I was able to do that. If I was still drinking, I don't know if I'd have been able to do it or not. But when she passed away, why, it was really a blessing that she went. She didn't even know me at the end, and that's okay because, you see, our house was in order. And they talk about that in the vision for you, your house had to be in order. Well, our house was in order, and all the things that needed to be said had long been said. I don't mean to stand up here and say that we had the world's greatest marriage or anything like that. That's far from true. We had a turbulent marriage, that's for damn sure. But I was there for her. And so when she died, I don't have any guilt. The marvelous thing, to be free from guilt, because, you see, I did everything I was supposed to do. And the thing that Clancy was talking about that first time I ever heard him, about the sins of omission. If only I would have done this. If only I would have done that. If I should have said this, I should have said that. I don't have any of those feelings. And so I'm able to close the door on that part of my life. And that part's over. And now I'm starting a new life. And I'll tell you, it's not all that easy, it turns out. Hell, I'm born married, I think. And I did, to get into the singles scene after all these years, all these feelings of inadequacy are coming back, just like when I was 16 and 17 years old. I know, you call some lady up to go out the dang, damn well they're not going to go, And then they say yes, and then you really are in trouble. And I got all these feelings, and they're feelings that I had back when I was 16 and 17 years old, and I know now why I started to drink in the first place. And I've also retired. And I've always worked. I've never been unemployed in my life. So, and I might say that it's bad. It's good. I enjoy being retired. I enjoy being single, but I'm just not used to it. And so I'm, this last year and a half now, I've been trying to put some order into my life again. And it's there. And it's great. And I'm having a good time. And I'm living on a boat, like it's been mentioned. And I sold my house. And if it doesn't fit on the boat, I don't want it. And I'm trying to simplify my life. And so I'm standing here today, pretty comfortable. And, and I'll bring you up to date. My son used to look at me funny back in those days. And, the reason he was looking at me so funny is that he was stoned out of his gore. It seemed like he had a problem with alcohol, too, and drugs, and LSD, and the whole shot. He took it all, And I'll be damned if he didn't turn himself into AA when he was 21 years old. Last May the 27th, I saw Clancy give him, no, not Clancy, I saw someone give him a cake. John Hackerman give him a cake for 14 years. And my grandson, my daughter's son, he's 20 years old, and he got 2.5 years of sobriety. The three of us, every Wednesday, go to the Pacific Group in West L.A., the largest meeting in the whole world, and we sit together and celebrate our sobriety. Sometimes they even let me sit with them. And my daughter and my daughter-in-law both send you greetings from Al-Anon. And we're an AA family. And we weren't any kind of a family 17.5 years ago. We're still not the best family on the block. I wouldn't try to kid anybody around here. But we all got programs to work if we choose to work. And life isn't all that bad. I'm a bit privileged to come here and other places to share. And God, when I was sitting in my lonely room drinking and fantasizing, I couldn't have fantasized what's happened to me in AA. I'd never been on an airplane before until after I got sober. And somebody, Mac Cheer, called me and told me to ask me if I would come to Winnipeg and speak. I got on a plane, God, and flew all the way to Winnipeg, And, all kinds of things, the new experiences have opened up for me because I haven't had to turn down an AA request. And so I have found a freedom there. And my message is the same message that I got when I came to my first meeting. And that is that it turns out to really be a spiritual program. And that I know that I found God when I walked through the doors of AA. And it's the light in the eyes of the people as it's burning on. Thank you very much.